All right, Mr. Trump has vowed to get tough with Iran, and he could get an assist on that from Congress. I spoke earlier with another outspoken critic of the Iran deal who may turn out to be one of Trump's best allies on Capitol Hill. Intelligence and Armed Services Committee member, GOP Senator Tom Cotton. Senator, thank you for joining us tonight. Good to have you. An historic election this week, a lot of changes coming to Washington. Let me talk with you about, first of all, the Iran deal. It is something that you were not a fan of. Donald Trump has said it was, quote, the stupidest deal he's ever seen, and he wants to take steps to undo it. How can he do that? Can Congress be a part of that? How will it work?
Well, Donald Trump's right. The Iran deal was the stupidest deal any of us have ever seen. In fact, Iran is violating that deal already. The Obama administration just acknowledged last week that there's another violation of it. The Congress, working with President-elect Trump, can reimpose sanctions on Iran. We can work with our allies to reimpose those sanctions. We have a lot of leverage. We're the world's largest economy by far. We can impose those sanctions for their violations of the nuclear deal and their violations of other obligations, like not building ballistic missiles that can reach U.S. troops and our allies, or not sponsoring terrorism that's been responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Americans, and not destabilizing the entire region. So I look forward very much with working with President-elect Trump to make sure that Iran doesn't continue to threaten American citizens and American interests around the world.
There's been a lot made of the fact that a Trump administration is going to approach Iran very differently than an Obama administration did. Some people see that as a positive, some see it as a negative. How do you think it'll work out?
Well, you know, Donald Trump throughout the campaign said that he was going to stand up for American interests, and he was going to take a tougher line with many of our adversaries around the world. And I think that's very important because Iran has been allowed to run wild throughout the Middle East for the last 8 years. The president focused more than anything on getting this nuclear deal, no matter what the terms were. That's one reason why Iran has been destabilizing the region in places like Iraq and Syria, while they continue to support terrorism. And Iran needs to understand that Donald Trump is going to be a different kind of president. Just like the Ayatollahs understood that Ronald Reagan was going to be a different kind of president than Jimmy Carter was, and therefore they released all those hostages the very day that Ronald Reagan was sworn into office.
What about Syria?
Syria is a very complicated situation because President Obama has stood at a distance and let Syria burn for 5 years. You've had the rise of the Islamic State. You now have Russia that's reasserting itself as a major power in the Middle East for the first time in 40 years. You have a mass humanitarian crisis. So we have troops on the ground in Iraq and in Syria. Ultimately, though, we have to focus on American interests, which is destroying the Islamic State once and for all and ensuring that Syria doesn't become a safe haven for terrorist organizations like the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda to launch attacks against us of the kind that we saw in 9/11. Donald Trump made these points throughout the campaign. I think that's one reason why he won last week, because the American people are ready for a president who is going to take a little bit firmer line in defense of American interests.
And of course, his critics say that he is a hothead. They worry how he's going to deal with foreign leaders, how he'll relate to them, how he'll handle these very serious foreign policy challenges. You have been supportive of him as the nominee throughout this process. I know you've talked with him. Do you think it's set into him what he's facing, what the reality of what the 45th president of the United States is walking into?
I believe it has. You know, no one can be fully prepared to be president until they take that oath of office on Inauguration Day. But I know that many world leaders have been calling Donald Trump to congratulate him. I'm sure that those calls have been going very well. Again, we need a new president who is a bit tougher in the defense of American interests. Donald Trump campaigned on that. That's one reason why he won. I think most world leaders realize that America is going to take a tougher line in the world again. That's not just something that our adversaries need to hear. That's also something that our allies around the world have been seeking for a long time, the kind of reassurance that Donald Trump is going to provide them after 8 years of Barack Obama retreating from around the world.
I want to ask you a domestic question before we let you go about the Supreme Court. It's going to be one of the very first big decisions that President-elect Trump will have to make. Several of your colleagues have been floated, Senator Lee, Senator Ayotte, Senator Cruz, and others. What kind of fight do you think he's going to have in the Senate? I mean, the GOP remains in control, but you don't have the 60 votes to get past that first procedural hurdle. Will some Democrats come on board and help? Do you think that there is some room to work together there on a nominee?
Well, I hope so. Again, Donald Trump promised throughout the campaign to nominate a jurist who would respect the Constitution and the laws of the United States as they're written. not try to impose his or her preferences on the law. He put out a list of 20-something candidates to be his nominee. I think they're all great potential nominees to the Supreme Court. I would encourage him to do that sooner rather than later. The Congress takes its the new Congress sits about 2 weeks before Donald Trump will get sworn in, so he could submit that, or he can nominate that person beforehand. And much like you do with the cabinet every 8 years, we could start hearings early in January and then maybe have that new justice confirmed by late in January.
There's a lot of work waiting for them and 8 anxious justices to find out who it's going to be. Senator, thank you for stopping in. Good to see you.
Thanks, Shannon. Great to be on with you.